When was the last time you walked into a gun store, saw an empty shelf where your favorite ammo should be, and felt a little sting of disappointment? Did you ever imagine that we'd go from widespread shortages to the exact opposite situation, with pallets of ammo carelessly stacked up in stores and online warehouses across America? In this video, we'll talk about exactly why there's now a massive surplus of certain calibers, how that surplus came to be, and why prices still aren't dropping the way you'd expect. Stick around, you won't want to miss this. Remember the 2020 ammo shortage? It was like a perfect storm. Civil unrest, a heated political environment, a global pandemic, and millions of new gun owners all converging at once. Shelves were wiped clean practically overnight, and those few boxes of 9mm or 223 and 556 you did find were going for ridiculous markups. Gun shows turned into something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. People haggling desperately for a single case of ammo at 2 or even 3 times the old prices. Nobody wants to go through that again, and for the most part, that's a big reason why we're seeing the surplus we have today. People bought a lot when they could, and manufacturers were determined never to be caught off guard in the same way again. After all, the ammo companies aren't oblivious. They witnessed how fast their product flew off the shelves in 2020, and they ramped up production like never before. Factories started adding new production lines, investing in better machinery, incorporating artificial intelligence in their processes to speed things up and reduce defects, and even purchasing new facilities altogether. The result? By the time demand slowed down, even just a little bit, these producers were still cranking out vast quantities of ammo. Suddenly, instead of supply lagging behind, it began to outpace demand. And here we are today, able to find relatively abundant supplies of certain calibers in almost any gun shop we walk into. But how's it possible that we could be in a surplus when there are still global conflicts going on, like the war in Ukraine, which has been a huge consumer of munitions, or Israel's heightened state of readiness? Aren't we sending most of our ammo overseas? The short answer is we were, but not as much anymore. At first, we were shipping vast amounts of 556 NATO and 762 NATO to support Ukraine, but European manufacturers have picked up a lot of that slack, with countries in Europe stepping up their own production like never before. New facilities have been built in various European nations specifically to supply Ukraine, so the US is not the sole provider it was at the start of that conflict. That means more ammo remains here in the States, fueling the surplus we see on our shelves. Let's talk specifics, because there are a few calibers in particular, 3 of them, that have become incredibly abundant. If you walk into your local gun store or browse online, you can sometimes see literal pallets of 556 stacked like we're preparing for a military operation. The same goes for 9mm and 762 NATO. While you may find decent stock levels on other common calibers like 45 ACP, 40 S&W, or various hunting rounds, it's these 3 that truly illustrate the situation. There are various factors at play, but a major piece of the puzzle is the Lake City Ammo Plant in Independence, Missouri. Owned by the U.S. Army and operated by Winchester, it's been running at full tilt for quite some time. They've also been undergoing massive renovations, demolishing old facilities, constructing new ones, implementing advanced AI-driven machinery, and even building an entirely new plant in Texas to produce ammo components. Every time they scale up, they pump out exponentially more rounds, particularly in those 3 NATO calibers. Because the military prioritizes those rounds, they're always going to be produced at huge volumes. And once you factor in that civilian demand isn't as frantic as it was in 2020 or 2021, those vast amounts of ammo are spilling into the commercial market. Now, you'd think that with so much ammo available, you'd be able to nab 556 or 9mm for pre-2020 prices or even cheaper, right? That's where things get interesting, because in many cases, you're not seeing those prices plummet. We're all basically taught that when supply is high and demand is low, prices go down. Yet here, we're encountering the opposite phenomenon. The supply is enormous, demand is more relaxed, but prices are not dropping significantly for some reason. In fact, there have even been formal announcements of price increases. Winchester, for instance, announced back in October that their ammo prices were going up 5 to 10% starting January 1st of this year. Sure enough, they followed through. Other manufacturers tend to watch major market players, and when Winchester does something like that, they often follow along. Part of the reason prices remain elevated is, as I said earlier, these ammo companies invested heavily in upgrades, expansions, and labor during the last few years, all while paying top dollar for raw materials in a more volatile market, so they're now looking to recoup those costs. If they can maintain higher prices without losing too many customers, that's beneficial to their bottom line. At the same time, they know we gun owners are more likely to buy at higher prices today, because we remember the pain of not being able to find ammo at any price. We're not waiting for $0.30 around 5.56 or $0.20 around 9mm to show up. We're too worried about being left out if a crisis happens tomorrow. The companies have effectively discovered that the price elasticity for ammo is such that many of us simply refuse to be caught short again. That's the biggest factor allowing them to keep prices elevated. There's also the reality that raw materials, shipping costs, and labor costs have gone up across the board. Even though demand has cooled somewhat, these costs don't necessarily plummet just because there's more ammo available. Manufacturers can cite inflation and higher wages to justify not dropping their prices, and from a purely financial standpoint, that's not entirely incorrect. Of course, from a Pro 2A consumer perspective, it can be frustrating to see so much ammo and still pay more than we did 5 or 6 years ago. But the difference in 5 or 6 years is the memory of that shortage. Nobody wants to go back to that scenario. So what can we, as Pro 2A advocates and shooters, do to navigate this strange market scenario? First, it pays to look for deals and buy in bulk if you can. Even though prices might still feel high, the cost per round does come down significantly when you start looking at 500 or 1,000 round cases. Many online retailers offer bulk discounts, and that's often more economical than buying a single box of 20 or 50 rounds at a time. Second, keep an eye out for sales and clearance events. Sometimes stores will do inventory turnover and need to clear space for new shipments. You might find hidden gems, especially if you're not picky about brand or type, so long as the quality meets your reliability standards. One other strategy is to diversify your calibers. If you own multiple firearms in different calibers, you can become less reliant on just one ammo type. For instance, if you have a .308 in addition to your .556 AR or maybe a .45 ACP pistol alongside your 9mm, you can take advantage of whichever ammo is a better deal at any given time. This obviously requires investing in multiple firearms chambered in different calibers, but many gun owners are already doing that. It's just about staying flexible and taking advantage of deals where you can find them. Another approach is to consider reloading. While components can be expensive, reloading can give you some control over your supply and potentially save money in the long run, especially if you shoot frequently or have specialized ammo requirements. Let's also not forget that global situations can shift quickly, which means there's always a possibility that our current surplus could turn into a renewed shortage if a major conflict escalates or if we see a sudden spike in domestic demand. Any changes in laws, upcoming elections, or significant geopolitical events can swing the pendulum back in the other direction, potentially leading to another rush on ammunition. Being Pro 2A means not only understanding our right to keep and bear arms, but also appreciating that markets can move in unpredictable ways. It's wise to keep a modest stock on hand, enough to train regularly and meet your self-defense needs without going into panic buying mode. Some of you might be thinking, well, if the companies are charging high prices, maybe I'll just boycott them until they bring costs down. While that's one approach, it's often not effective when the memory of a shortage is still fresh. Enough people will continue to buy for the reasons we've discussed, the fear of being left out if supplies dry up again. Boycotts in the ammo space tend not to work the same way they might for other consumer goods, because ammo is something people truly see as necessary, especially Pro 2A folks who train regularly or want to be prepared for emergencies. Let's be honest, we're not going to completely stop buying ammo, but we can be more strategic in how we do it. If you've enjoyed this discussion so far, or if you've learned something new about why the ammo market is flooded yet still priced higher, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. Sharing this video with friends who may also be curious about the ammo surplus will help them stay informed too. And if you click that bell icon, you'll be notified whenever we post new videos breaking down all things firearms and Second Amendment related. But back to the topic, we now have a massive surplus of 5.56 NATO, 9mm NATO, and 7.62 NATO. Military factories like Lake City are modernizing and always running at full capacity, and Europe is stepping up to produce their own ammo for conflicts like the one in Ukraine, thus reducing how much the US needs to ship overseas. Another angle to consider is that some smaller manufacturers or newer ones may try to break into the market with lower prices or special bulk deals. They might see this as an opportunity to gain market share. While that could lead to pockets of competition and slightly better prices here and there, the established giants, Winchester, Federal, Remington, and so on, have strong brand recognition and massive production capabilities that can overshadow smaller competitors. They can also strike deals with major retailers, ensuring that their product dominates the shelf space. For the consumer, that means fewer alternatives if you specifically want one of the big-name brands. But if you're open to smaller or lesser-known brands, you might find some decent deals. Of course, do your research, because not all ammo brands are created equal in terms of quality and reliability. At the end of the day, the best advice is to stay informed, keep an eye on the market, and buy strategically. We're in a place right now where you can find abundant ammo, especially in the 3 calibers I mentioned, but you need to be smart about how you purchase it if you want to avoid overpaying. The fact that we have a surplus at all shows just how American manufacturers and the Pro 2A community responded to the stress test of the 2020 shortage. We overcorrected a bit. Now we have more ammo than we need, but at least it's there if things go sideways again. That's a better scenario than not having any at all. The challenge, moving forward, is whether or not producers will eventually lower their prices or if they'll keep them high until there's another wave of demand. With every passing month that stock doesn't move, it becomes a cost for them in terms of storage, logistics, and inventory management. Eventually, if enough of it sits idle, we might see more competitive pricing. But for now, it seems they're testing how long they can hold these prices in an environment where we, as 2A enthusiasts, are determined not to be caught off guard again. And that's really the bottom line. We must always remain vigilant as responsible gun owners. This is our right and our responsibility. And the ammo market is just one aspect of that. Knowing the backstory behind these surpluses, keeping up with industry trends, and recognizing how fear and memory play into pricing can help us make better decisions. If this video was helpful in any way, please like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for more of these videos. Thanks for watching, and thanks for standing firm in support of the Second Amendment. Your viewership helps spread awareness so we can all stay informed and protect our rights.